but not on the phone.
Okay.
Hey, how you doing? Danelle, thanks so much for being here. All right, great turnout for after a holiday weekend.
I do have Emily Curio from DOH messaged me and said her and a few others are using a Teams link that was on the agenda sent out last week, and they're in a different room.
Oh, don't use the link on the agenda itself.
Okay.
Yeah, from the website, the SURSAC website, that should be the correct link.
All right, so let's.
There's a link there.
Thanks so much, Tim. So in case others didn't hear that, apparently the link on the agenda that was linked on the website for the Teams meeting has the incorrect Teams info. And so if you know anybody who's like, hey, I'm trying to join the SURSAC meeting and I just can't get in, or I'm in this empty room, have them join the link that's on the website itself. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe there's a link provided there.
All right, so apologies for that, but it sounds like we got at least 48 people here, but there might be more joining. So
Yeah, it might be.
all right, so going back to the agenda real quick. See, we got through the reminders and public comments, HCA and Department of Health announcements. And so as you can see on the agenda, I invited some colleagues, some friends from the Healthcare Authority and Department of Health to join me in kind of helping to provide some welcome announcements, some new efforts that are happening, and also, like I did a couple months ago when Sarah Mariani from our prevention section joined us and gave just a quick overview about prevention work that's happening within the Division of Behavioral Health and Recovery. We have Nicole Mims here, who's a section manager supporting diversion and reentry under the True Blood initiatives here as well, and then Emily Curio. Before we pass off to Nicole and Emily, Sarah, are you here to tell us about the post-overdose support toolkit?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to share about a new resource that HCA has developed and published, the Post-Overdose Support Toolkit for Loved Ones. So I am going to copy that link in the chat here so you can take a look while I am talking about it. So this was developed by the Healthcare Authority in partnership with Health Management Associates and informed by experts in the field, as well as individuals with lived experience with overdose themselves or supporting a loved one after they have survived an overdose. So the intended audience would be family members, friends, other loved ones of those who have experienced or are at risk of experiencing an overdose, and particularly those with opioid use disorder. So the intended impact in developing this resource was really to widen the safety net to mitigate the risk of subsequent overdose by educating and empowering and supporting loved ones. And what we found in looking through existing literature on overdose and overdose response and kind of what to do after an overdose is that existing resources are primarily for the individual who has experienced an overdose, or if geared to family and loved ones was a little bit more broad, like how to talk to your loved one about their substance use, and not as specific and in-depth as kind of like what we wanted to develop. So this is in the format of a digital guide, and we're actively working on making this digital guide more printer friendly, so that it can be accessed digitally, but also in print, as well as a companion one-pager to go along with it, and a resource library that will have different resources that are like hotlines, physical places, things that people in Washington State can, things or resources that people in Washington State can depend on in these situations and responding after an overdose. So the process for creating this toolkit has been unfolding over the last year and has involved literature reviews, focus groups, surveys, one-on-one interviews, and extensive review by HCA and DOH staff. And the final product is 33 pages. So it's not intended to be read cover to cover. This is really intended to be a resource guide and one that dives deeper on some content for which current literature for the same audience is sparse, so that loved ones really do have that kind of in-depth access to what information they want and when they want it. And just to kind of preview some topics covered, it includes what an overdose is and how it happens, how to spot signs of an overdose and overdose response, ways to reduce overdose risk, what may happen after administering naloxone, and that for people with an opioid dependence, they're likely to experience withdrawal, and it educates on some ways that withdrawal can be treated and how to navigate care in hospital setting. Our Office of Tribal Affairs supported in developing a page in the toolkit that speaks to disproportionate impacts of overdose on American Indian, Alaska Native communities, as well as unique healing and cultural practices. We provide some historical and clinical context for the overdose crisis and drug dependency, and how in the age of fentanyl, overdose became far more common as a way to destigmatize overdose as a personal failing. We also have some information on kind of the stages of change model and what sorts of conversational prompts are helpful in supporting individuals at different stages of change to promote behaviors that reduce risk of future overdose, as well as lots of links to relevant supportive resources throughout, with a map of opioid treatment programs, syringe service programs, and health engagement hubs in Washington state. So I just wanted to provide a little preview today. I will come back with a more in-depth presentation on the resource and how it was developed and what and whom informed the resource at a later meeting. And I do have several other presentations at other like opioid work groups, things like that, leading up to upcoming SURSAC meetings. But in the meantime, I'll pop my email in the chat, and please feel free to reach out to me with any questions.
Sarah, thank you so much. And thanks so much to everyone that helped support the development of that toolkit. And we have the link for the toolkit in the chat, as well as Sarah's contact information. And thanks so much for being here today to share that information. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague and fellow section manager in DBHR, Nicole Mims, to tell us a little bit about the work that they do over in the diversion and reentry section, and some of the True Blood efforts across the state. So, Nicole.
Thank you, Tony, and good morning, everybody. As Tony said, my name is Nicole Mims, and I'm a section manager alongside Tony here within the Division of Behavioral Health and Recovery. And one of the teams within our section is the True Blood team. And for those of you who don't know, True Blood is an active lawsuit that challenged unconstitutional delays in competency evaluation and restoration services. In April 2015, a federal court found that the Department of Social and Health Services, DSHS, was taking too long to provide competency evaluation and restoration services. Because of this case, the state entered into a settlement agreement that outlines an array of services to better deliver the right care at the right time to the right people and reduce the number of people who become or remain True Blood class members. Many of the problems with untimely competency evaluations are preventable if fewer people with mental illness enter the criminal court system in the first place. When people can access the treatment they need when they need it, they are more likely to avoid the criminal court system. As a result of the True Blood Settlement Agreement of Contempt, the Healthcare Authority, in partnership with DSHS, are enhancing existing crisis behavioral health services to include expanding crisis bed capacity in Spokane, King County, and the Thurston Mason region, implementing new programs such as outpatient competency restoration, forensic housing and recovery through peer services, or FHARPs, forensic projects for the assistance in transition from homelessness, or FPATH, and forensic HARPs teams provide housing and support and subsidies to people ordered into OCRP, as well as others who have a history of being a True Blood class member or have the potential to become a True Blood class member, and those people are experiencing homelessness or are unstably housed. The goal is to assist eligible individuals in obtaining and maintaining housing. And the forensic path teams are comprised of an assertive outreach and engagement team. Each month, these teams are provided a list of people who have been ordered to 2 or more competency evaluations in the last 2 years. The list is generated by our partners at Research Data Analysis, a division of DSHS. The Forensic Path Program Administrator at the Healthcare Authority distributes this list to the teams in all of the phased implementation regions. And the goal of these teams is to connect people to community-based resources to reduce their likelihood of returning to the criminal court system. And I'm going to share my screen here and talk a bit more. Can everyone see my screen? Yes? Okay. So as I said, the True Blood Contempt Settlement Agreement outlines an array of services intended to deliver the right care at the right time to the right people who have a history of cycling through the criminal court system to reduce the number of people who become or remain True Blood class members. We recently entered the 4th phase of implementation for our programming, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means for phase 4. And for those that are visual, here is a picture of our state. In phase 1, we began these programs at the beginning of the pandemic in March of 2020. And phase 1 was the Southwest region of Clark, Klickitat, and Skamania counties, Pierce County, as well as the Spokane region, which is the 6 counties over on the east side of the state in the top right corner. In phase 2, we entered into King County and implemented our programs and services there. And then phase 3 was the Thurston Mason region, as well as the Salish region. And then phase 4, which just recently began a few months ago, is an opportunity for us to enhance existing programming across the state. And this again is a visual that kind of outlines all of the interconnectedness of these programs and services. Forensic navigators, which I won't speak too much about, those are positions within DSHS, and DSHS is responsible for having forensic navigators across the state in the phased regions to be the liaison between the court and the people ordered into outpatient competency restoration. So our outpatient competency restoration teams across the state work very closely with those forensic navigators and accept referrals for forensic path, as well as work with them for everyone that is enrolled in outpatient competency restoration. Enhanced peer services are services that are existing within all of our element programs. We ensure through our contracts with all of our community behavioral health agencies that some of the people, at least in part within these contracted teams, are people with lived experience in behavioral health and many who have experienced homelessness as well. Outpatient competency restoration. This is the, our program is the only outpatient competency restoration program in the state. Prior to 2020, the only place that people could be ordered to receive competency restoration services was in an inpatient locked psychiatric hospital. And so with the implementation of outpatient competency restoration, people can be ordered in their home communities and receive supportive services through forensic HARPS and forensic path if they are on that referral list that RDA generates that I spoke about earlier. And OCRP is really designed to assess individual barriers to competency, to help with medication management, psychoeducational programming, referrals to competency evaluation, and referrals to other support services such as behavioral health and residential services for ongoing housing support and stability. So for the phase 4 enhancements for OCRP, all of our existing programs will now have funding to add an engagement specialist as well as a data entry specialist. And these positions are to ensure that engagement specialists will ensure that referrals are followed up quickly from forensic navigators, and that there is a dedicated person to kind of manage the referrals and engagement of people that are newly ordered into the program. And then data entry specialist, kind of self-explanatory, but is there to ensure that all of the data elements for these programs are entered timely and accurately into the data management system. Forensic HARPS, which is our housing and recovery through peer services, supportive housing and intensive housing case management program. Again, staffed with people with lived experience. We are, for phase 4, also adding a data entry specialist and an engagement specialist, because we have found that many people are engaged for some time and then lose engagement with the teams. And so this engagement specialist is really there to help ensure that people, that outreach can happen and ensure that people can have the support and services that they need to become stable. A brand new program as part of phase 4 is our post-forensic HARPS global leasing program. And as part of the phase 4 implementation plan, we created this extension, essentially, of our forensic HARPS program for all of those folks who come to the end of their time in the forensic HARPS program and do not have any other housing programs or services to connect to. And so we currently have 2 contracts for this program, one in the southwest region of the state, and the other one is in Pierce County. And this program is really essential for ensuring that people who have become stable in their housing can sustain supportive services through case management and other connections to ongoing housing. And for these, this program, the community-based behavioral health agency contracts or holds the lease, I should say, for the housing, that then they can determine who goes in and out of that housing and at what cadence that makes sense. So they can kind of manage the housing units that they have available to them, and they are the leaseholder. Columbia River Mental Health and Comprehensive Life Resources are our first 2 contracts for that program. And then crisis housing vouchers is another element of the healthcare authority that we implemented as part of the settlement agreement. We contract to provide short-term housing vouchers to help stabilize someone who has experienced a behavioral health crisis, who has discharged possibly from a crisis stabilization unit, or who has been identified in the community as someone experiencing a behavioral health crisis who is in need of a short-term housing voucher. In many Washington counties, law enforcement may take individuals to emergency departments, crisis stabilization facilities, or jails when they experience a behavioral health crisis. Our intention here is to ensure that people that are experiencing behavioral health crises are able to be served and connected to treatment and recovery services instead of jail and arrest. Forensic Path, again, is our Projects for Assistance in Transition from Homelessness, or FPATH. It's an assertive outreach and engagement program for people with 2 or more competency evaluations in the past 2 years. Teams provide case management services to help people achieve identified goals and transition into longer-term outpatient behavioral health services. HCA continues to provide technical assistance to support phase 4 program enhancements. HCA is partnering with the Washington State Office of Public Defense to provide FPATH teams with knowledge, expertise, and guidance of the criminal court system. These services will help bridge the gap between the behavioral health and legal systems for people that are enrolled in the Forensic Path program. So this enhancement is really something that has been identified by our contracted behavioral health agencies, our FPATH teams, because many of the people working within these teams do not have the the criminal court knowledge or experience. There are many people who have been doing homeless outreach and engagement and intensive case management with this population. But this enhancement for this program will really assist our teams in navigating that criminal court system and ensure that if people have outstanding warrants or other entanglements with the criminal court system, that they can address those barriers and help folks resolve whatever entanglement they have with the criminal court system. And then crisis bed capacity. One of the elements that we oversee at the Healthcare Authority is to ensure that each region where we are implementing programs and services, that we have sufficient crisis bed capacity to serve the region. And so, like I mentioned earlier, in Spokane, there's an added 16 bed unit in the Spokane region that was a result of our implementation in phase 1. In phase 2, our expectation is that we add 2 crisis stabilization facilities there. And so we have been successful implementing 1 with Connections Washington, which is in Kirkland. And we're currently working with the King County team that is overseeing the expansion of crisis care facilities in King County to ensure that we are supporting a crisis stabilization facility in the South King County region for that second crisis stabilization facility. And then in phase 3, we are increasing crisis bed capacity in the Thurston Mason region. And so we're working with the BHASO partners and Department of Commerce, who oversees the capital funds for crisis stabilization facilities and other behavioral health facilities across our state. So that is currently underway, with Connections Washington being the successful applicant for that Thurston Mason region, much like they were in King County. Oh, and this is a element of DSHS. So I think that is all of the slides for the Healthcare Authority elements of the settlement agreement. I'm happy to put my email in the chat or can answer questions if folks have any.
Nicole, thank you so much for that really helpful overview. You know, what I may ask the committee members to be thinking about is, like, if there are any specific pieces of the True Blood work where we would want to invite Nicole and her team to come back for like a deeper dive. I mean, we know there's a lot of overlap between the populations that are being served through some of the Blake funded programs and the True Blood programs. And so we have people in these kind of 2 systems that are at sometimes being served by, contractors, behavioral health agencies simultaneously. And so I'm so glad that Nicole is able to join and just kind of provide a high level overview. And just, be thinking if there's anything in particular, like whether it's forensic path or some of the work around housing vouchers that we want to invite them to come back in 2026 for a more in-depth conversation. I think that'll align with what we're talking about later briefly about kind of 2026 planning, like how do we want to spend time going into the next year. And so, Nicole, thank you for sharing your contact information. Thank you for being here, and thank you and your team for all the work you're doing to support the True Blood members. And with that, we're moving on to our final guest update from Department of Health, Emily Hurio.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
You can.
Great, thanks for having me. My name's Emily Hurio. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm at Department of Health. I manage a section in the Office of Infectious Disease that includes our drug user health programs, our viral hepatitis prevention work, and our work around infectious disease testing in community settings. And I've shared some resources in the chat on this call in the past, but I thought it would be helpful to do a little bit of a deeper dive and make sure everyone on SURSAC is aware of some resources both our office has developed and also some of our colleagues in DOH, some other resources that others in the agency have developed that might be of use to you. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully that will work. So I just typed them up in a Word document. I'll send this to you, Tony, if it's something you can send out. It has all the hyperlinks. But wanted to share a few things. One is that we have this hub with hepatitis C resources, and given the frequency of hepatitis C sort of co-occurring among people who use drugs, particularly people who inject drugs, I thought knowing about this resource would be helpful. We have some resources for community members. We have some resources in various languages. So we have Spanish, Chinese simplified, Russian, Ukrainian, and Vietnamese. If there are other languages that would be helpful, always let us know, and we're happy to get those translated. But that's some resources for community members that are hopefully fairly simple and easy to read and could be helpful tools to share with folks. We have a web page with our syringe service programs information, including some resources about why the Department of Health supports syringe service programs, the legality of the programs. We also have a link to the syringe service program directory, where folks can search by county or by accountable community of health. And we also have a section with, it needs to be updated, but much of the research published since 2007 that supports syringe service programs. There's also some other resources at the bottom of that page, both DOH resources, CDC resources, which honestly those links may not work anymore, and some other resources that might be of interest. We have the naloxone finder. A version of this used to live on stopoverdose.org, and University of Washington ADAI sort of originated this resource, and then we've transitioned it over to DOH. It looks a little bit different, but you can search by area of the state, for places that have free naloxone in your community. I want to make sure folks know about that. We've recently created a resource with colleagues in the office, as well as folks working on high potency synthetic opioid efforts with the child welfare system and protecting children from accidental overdose. And there's many resources, but wanted to share this around naloxone and clarifying that it's safe for people of all ages, including infants and toddlers. Many of the cases where children have been exposed to opioids, naloxone was not used, and we want to make sure to encourage folks to use naloxone if they suspect an accidental overdose with infants or toddlers. And also this resource clarifies that naloxone is safe for pregnant people. We have a one-pager that's been revised, just strategies to prevent or respond to opioid overdose. It's just some simple tips, and make sure these are all linked on the handout that I'll send, so don't worry if you're not catching all these. We recently created a resource with Commerce for housing and shelter programs. Hello, words. Good morning, Monday after a holiday. So this has some resources for housing and shelter programs to prevent and respond to overdose. It has recommendations for program leadership and staff. It has information for how to support residents, and then it has this sort of checklist at the back for agencies to consider, have they thought through sort of, are staff trained? Is there naloxone on site? What happens if there is an overdose? And then also post-response activities, debriefing with folks, because it is a scary experience potentially. We also have a resource around how to use health coverage to get naloxone at a pharmacy. So making sure folks with health coverage who are in need of naloxone understand how to use their health coverage, whether that's Apple Health, PEB and SEB for those of us who are in the public employee or school employee system, or if people have other health coverage where they can use their health coverage to access naloxone. We have an issue brief around the risks of high-dose naloxone products and nalmefene, which we've gotten a lot of questions about. We also have a YouTube video and a PowerPoint slide that go with this, if that's of use to folks. We have several data products and reports on our drug user health page, including some information about meth chill packs and some qualitative information from a community conversation about that. We have a semi-annual report of our overdose education and naloxone distribution work. We'll be putting a new one up in the next couple months. An analysis about funding challenges that harm reduction programs are facing in Washington, and a summary about naloxone kiosks. These last two resources were students supported us with that, and that was both, I think, an exciting learning project, but we got some really useful information from them. And then we also have our drug user health resource hub. The naloxone instructions live there, training videos about overdose response, how to use fentanyl test strips, how to use xylazine test strips, how to build an intramuscular naloxone kit if folks are putting those together, flyers for the naloxone finder resource that you can print out and give as a resource, how to respond to xylazine or tranq involved overdose. Syphilis facts for people who use drugs. We've seen an increase in syphilis, particularly among people who use stimulants, methamphetamine in particular. And then we have fentanyl test strip instructions and xylazine test strip instructions. And then just quickly wanted to note, there is a DOH opioids webpage that might be useful for folks. The team that works on maternal child health has created lactation guidance and patient education, and that has information about substance use and lactation. And then there's also some resources about fentanyl exposure in public places, which we've gotten lots of questions about. So I know that was a quick and dirty run through. I'll send this sheet to Tony to share with all of you. But wanted to make sure folks were familiar with all these resources, and also invite you, if there's resources you don't see here that would be useful to your work, please reach out to me and we can consider adding them. I'll put my email in the chat, but my email is also on the one pager that I'll be sending to Tony. So I'm happy to take any quick questions. That I know time is at a premium here. So I'll be sending this resource along. Please feel free to email me if you have questions, or if there's other resources that you would find helpful, or if there's any of these you need in translation and we don't have them available in the language that you're seeking. Thanks.
Thanks so much for being here, and just so many great resources coming out of the Department of Health, and just really appreciate the opportunity to collaborate, coordinate, and continue to get those resources out into the community. And so we'll make sure that we get those included with our notes, the minutes. We'll put it up on the SURSAC webpage as a standalone document. And thank you for sharing your contact information. With the amount of, and when you think about like the past three people that shared, like so much time and effort went into all that work and continues to go into all that work. And so it's amazing just to see how much is happening across Washington state as it pertains to individuals with behavioral health needs, might be in the criminal court system, you know, individuals who are using drugs. And so just really, really appreciate you all being here this morning. And sorry that it went a little bit over in terms of the agenda, but I do want to make sure, Blake, that we touch on the next couple of agenda items. Luckily, we built in some extra flexible time into the agenda. And so I think if we're able to just check real quick with committee members and see if there's any public feedback or comments.
Thanks, Tony. Yes. We'll go with committee members first here. If there are any announcements you would like to make, resources you would like to share, anything of that nature. So this is the time for committee member announcements. So again, this is for committee members. If you go ahead and raise your hand. Okay. Don't see any hands. So let's go ahead and move on to public comments. So if you have a comment, you're a member of the public and you'd like to make a comment, please go ahead and raise your hand. All right, I see Laura. Laura, you have roughly 3 minutes.
Thank you and good morning. Can you hear
Good
me?
morning. Yes.
Oh, wonderful. I'm calling from Seattle, King County, and I heard on the radio this morning that, and I was happy to hear that people in the prisons now have access to using 988, you know, the 3-digit number in the event of crisis or suicidal ideation, etc. And I just wondered if you knew about that and if there might be some tracking that would inform especially substance use issues by looking at how that might get used in the near future. I thought it was cutting edge. I think it's the first location, they said, in the United States that would be making 988 available to people in the prison kind of DOC environment.
Thank you. Anything from the room? Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Laura, for kind of bringing this up. Honestly, it's the first I've heard about it. We do have a couple of different teams at the Healthcare Authority working on reentry efforts, you know, underneath our waiver, as well as a number of programs that are supporting services for incarcerated individuals. Let me take that back and kind of confer with some of my colleagues, and we can try to get more information by the January meeting. So thanks so much for flagging that.
Absolutely. Thank you as well.
Thank you, Laura. Any other public comments? Questions for that matter? Right. Carlene, go ahead. Carlene, can you hear me? I see your hand raised, but maybe you're still on mute. No response from Carlene there.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know if you have an answer for this, but I was wondering if any of the presenters today or SURSAC members know what budget requests might look like for 2026. I think it was Nicole I heard mention a request potentially for additional staff related to compliance with True Blood, but of course we're going to be in another tough budget situation. So I didn't know if any of that information is out yet as far as what those requests might look like.
Thank you.
So thank you for the question. All of the agency budget requests can be found on OFM's website. We can put the link to that resource in the chat. It's public and available. And then we expect the governor's proposed budget to be released in the next couple of weeks.
Hope that answers that, Carlene. So OFM.
Thank you.
Good resource for that. All right. And Christy, go ahead.
Hi. I just wanted to inquire about being a part of the SURSAC.
Okay.
You know, I've messaged several times over the last few years, and there's always not an opening. But I noticed last month in November there was for an adult with long-term recovery. But now this month I don't see that again. So I'm just wondering how I should proceed.
Oh, hi, Christy. I
Hi.
will be in touch with you. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat. If you want to email me directly, I can send you the application.
That would be great. Thank you.
And thanks so much for your interest in participating and being a part of this work.
Very much.
All right. Thank you. That email is in the chat. Thank you so much. Thanks, Christy. Okay. Any other public comments? All right. Tony, do you want to introduce our presentation today?
I do, and thank them so much for being patient. We're a little bit behind schedule. So thank you all. I know that there's a very large group here that are helping to support the next presentation that we have. This is part 3 in a series that we've had throughout 2025 around the topic of law enforcement assisted diversion, let everyone advance with dignity, and the work that's happening across the state, not just specific to Recovery Navigator program, but all the pre-booking diversion work that is occurring and the efforts, cross-system efforts between law enforcement, prosecuting attorney's office, county government, behavioral health agencies to support efforts to really engage with individuals upstream, help to serve them and help provide services outside of the criminal court system and as well as within the criminal court system. And so just really appreciate our colleagues or our partners from the Lead Support Bureau being here today. And again, apologies to everyone that's here for that presentation for the delay. And I'm not quite sure who I should pass it to.
I'll take it, Tony.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having us. Thanks to Tony, Michelle, and our HCA colleagues for inviting this series. I'm going to speed through our early slides here to try to still finish close to 10:30. My name's Lisa Dugard. I'm co-executive director at Purpose Dignity Action, formerly the Public Defender Association, PDA. We're the home base for the Lead Support Bureau. We also are the project management team for the flagship LEAD program in Seattle, King County. As Tony mentioned, this is the third of 3 presentations on LEAD, and we're going to assume most of the folks listening heard the first 2, but we know not everybody did. So I'm just going to say a couple of quick words about the LEAD framework. In the years before the pandemic, the state of Washington sponsored a couple of different initiatives, grant programs to foster replication of the LEAD model. It started in Seattle, King County in 2011 after a sort of multi-arm evaluation from 2015 to 2017. A lot of other communities around the state and country became interested in replicating it. And the state began to sponsor grant programs for replication in 2018, 2019. In 2021, the Recovery Navigator program was one of the legislature's responses to the Blake decision, creating LEAD replication resources around the state. Many people on SURSAC, I know many of the names that I see who are watching are part of implementation and have played an incredibly important role. So those of us presenting are by no means the only experts on the model here on and relating to SURSAC. But as a reminder of what it does, the framework is an attempt to connect people who chronically commit law violations, various law violations, not just possession and public use of narcotics, but due to substance use disorder or other behavioral health conditions or poverty, to ongoing care and support, sort of a golden thread of ongoing case management that is able to assist tackling multiple different kinds of obstacles, health, and other support needs. In this way, it's aligned with the SAMHSA recovery model, which emphasizes 4 pillars of recovery: a safe place to live, sort of bodily security and safety, access to health resources, both behavioral and physical, connection, relationship, and hope and meaning. So LEAD is organized around those principles of recovery and features ongoing case management because recovery is often nonlinear, but also multidimensional. There are barriers and challenges, especially for the population that is chronically exposed to the criminal legal system connected to behavioral health issues, and ongoing case management that's capable of navigating multiple kinds of problems and challenges is the core feature. The other is ongoing coordination between case management and the other players who frequently are going to encounter participants in the program and need to know how to exercise their discretion to maximize the chance that somebody will and can recover, and harmonize to the extent possible how the legal system and the enforcement system responds so that it isn't unwittingly sort of undoing the progress that case managers might be doing. I'm going to quickly, can we just go back to the first slide? Sorry, Brandy. Okay, so quick round of intros so that we don't get stuck with those in each of the chapters of this presentation. Let me turn to you, Brandy.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Brandy McNeil, and as Lisa said earlier, I'm a Deputy Director at PDA, overseeing the project management of the local lead program in Seattle and King County.
And Jason Schwartz.
Yep. Hello, everybody. I'm Jason Schwartz. I am the Director of the Snohomish County Office of Public Defense, and I am also the past president of the Bar Association's Council on Public Defense. Good to meet you all.
Thanks, Jason. Vanessa, are you able to introduce yourself? Vanessa's been flickering in and out on Teams.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Vanessa Martin. I'm part of the lead management team up in Whatcom County.
Thank you. And Under Sheriff Chapman?
Good morning. Chris Chapman, Under Sheriff Whitman County.
And Sergeant Navarro?
Good morning, Sergeant Navarro with the Tumwater Police Department, currently a shift supervisor.
Thank you. And Officer Moorback.
I'm Officer John Moorback with the Clarkson Police Department, and I'm our community service officer as well. And I'm also our link with the RMP program.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, everybody. Okay, Brandy, if we can go to the next slide. So we're quickly going to hit a number of different, this is not a lead 101, as I mentioned. We are trying in this presentation to situate this framework, lead recovery navigator program, arrest and jail alternatives programs that are lead aligned in our current landscape, both with respect to criminal legal system challenges and dynamics and the behavioral health system, flagging ways in which this framework is particularly relevant in the present moment. Okay, we can move on. Turning now to Jason, who's going to explain recent developments with respect to public defense caseloads and how this is related to the value of and need for pre-booking or pre-charging diversion options. Jason.
Yep, thanks. And can we move to the next slide? All right, I'm going to give a little bit of background about public defense. And some of you may know that there was a revision to public defense caseload standards in March of 2024. It was in a lot of newspapers for a lot of different reasons. But the Washington State Bar Association amended their caseload standards for public defenders. And I'm going to get to what that means in a moment. But important to note that the Washington State Supreme Court is considering adopting those standards as a court rule, which more than the bar standards, which impacts me as a lawyer, it certainly regulates me as a lawyer. The court's rules regulate courts, which means that they will have an impact if the court adopts these standards on local budgets as they relate to the courts and staffing of public defenders. The reason that there was a change that the Bar Association brought about new standards was largely in response to a survey by the State Office of Public Defense about public defenders and former public defenders, who many of whom have left the practice, and we're seeing a mass exodus of public defenders in the practice, and a real challenge in recruiting new public defenders. And the main reason for that has been caseloads, public defense caseloads. And that has been the prime driver of why we've have a challenge recruiting new public defenders. What you're looking at is a slide about what the caseload standards used to be prior to March of 2024. In this presentation, I'm going to largely focus on felonies just because it's going to be easier to chat about one data set. So in the past, a lawyer like me could take 150 felony cases annually. And if you are a misdemeanor attorney, 400, and if you are a juvenile attorney, 250. Next slide, please. What that really meant, because there was no differentiation in the caseload standards between types of cases, I could get, as an attorney, 150 murder cases or 150 drug possession cases. And there was no differentiation about that. Obviously, that's not what most jurisdictions did. Most public defenders got a mixed caseload. But what that 150 felony limit meant was that it didn't differentiate between case types. And that also means if you annualize that and you imagine how many hours I'm going to work on a case, if I have 150 cases in a year, what that largely comes down to is 11 cases per felony. So imagine if you were in the market for a criminal defense attorney, either hopefully not for yourself, but a family member, you would probably not hire the attorney who says they're not only going to be able to work 11 hours per case. And so knowing that this was also not fair to the defendants who are involved, people were not getting good access to legal services, not getting routed to the services they needed outside the legal system, there was a need to revise the caseload standards. I'm going to ask you to move to the next slide, please. The new standards are essentially that there will be 47 felonies per year, so that's down from 150, and 120 misdemeanors, that's down from 300. And the next slide, please. What's important about these standards is this here. This is the expected average number of hours a public defense attorney will take to represent somebody in a case of each of these types. There was, like I mentioned, no differentiation in the past. Now the bar creates some expectations about how long it's going to take to resolve a case. Felony, you'll see on this categorization at the side there on the left says felony, low, mid, high. You can roughly associate that with our class C, B, and A felonies, with then some higher categorizations up above for sex offenses and murders. So if you look at this, what it really means is that if I were assigning an attorney a murder case, I can expect that it's going to take them on roughly 248 hours to resolve that case. Why is the need for the change? I mean, partly it's that as I think our law enforcement officers and other lawyers on this Zoom meeting know, the practice has changed a ton. Since I was a public defender, we used to just get 1 or 2 page police reports, sometimes handwritten. Now we get every officer who responds to the scene, we get their dash cam, their body cam, written reports, forensics, and it just takes longer to represent somebody. So with these standards in place, we now know how long it's going to take somebody to represent a case of each case type. And hopefully each jurisdiction knows, on average, how many cases of each case type there are. What these standards will do is allow me as an administrator to more easily forecast my lawyer needs. Whereas before, without a differentiation between case types, I just knew that each lawyer could take 150 cases, but I wasn't really managing their hours. As a result, public defenders got overworked and they quit, and they were not giving good representation to their clients. So you can see how these hopefully will help me as a manager understand the work being done and how I can staff that. Now, I think here's the multi-million-dollar question, quite literally. What does this mean? And I don't have an answer for you statewide because public defense, like our courts, are decentralized. But let me give you an example of what this means in Snohomish County. In Snohomish County, with this change in the standards, what it means is we're going to need to change our staffing models. And as you may have heard, the Supreme Court is asking that change be implemented over 10 years. So right now in Snohomish County and Snohomish County Superior Court, we have 20 felony lawyers. Starting in 2026, we'll need about 8 more. So in 1 year to make that a change according to the court's order. So 8 more attorneys in 1 year. By the time the implementation is done, we will need approximately, what am I looking at here? About 50 more lawyers in the felony unit. So that is 50 more lawyers. If you imagine the cost of that, these are lawyers qualified to represent people on murder and sex cases and whatnot. That's quite expensive. You're talking about $200,000 per FTE with overhead and whatnot. But I want us to make a point here that's really important, I think, to this group. The bulk of those cases in Snohomish County are nonviolent case offenses. They're what we would call Class C offenses, property crimes. They are the offenses where I know as a public defender, I'm most likely to see substance abuse or someone experiencing trauma or mental illness or some kind of ACEs score, depending on my client at the age of my client. So a lot of work to be done on the low level property crimes and those kind of offenses because they are taking up the bulk of the work, even though if you're looking at this chart where you see felony low and you see that's 35 hours per se, let's say a stolen vehicle for me to represent somebody in a stolen vehicle. In reality, given the volume of offenses, it really takes up the bulk of a public defender's workload. That's all I have. I'm happy to answer questions at the end if there are questions, but I'll pass it back to Lisa right now.
Thanks so much, Jason. Can we move to the next slide, Brandy? So what's the relevance of all of this to pre-booking diversion? The critical moment when the right to a lawyer attaches is when somebody is taken into custody under our court rules. And so they have a right to, not everybody would ask for a lawyer at that point, but under our court rules, at least theoretically, sometimes honored in the breach, people have a right to talk to a lawyer. Certainly when a charge is filed, that is when the right to counsel on an ongoing basis is going to attach. And so to the extent that a viable, robust, effective alternative to somebody having a charge filed against them exists, this is an important way in which local governments that, like Jason said, are primarily responsible for bearing the cost of our legal system in Washington state, how they can avoid having to just, like almost like an ATM. Each case that's filed generates defined and significant costs for the assignment of counsel and requires that lawyers be available, which is really challenging at this moment when we have this workforce shortage. So pre-booking diversion, certainly pre-filing diversion, is a hugely beneficial potential strategy for local communities to lean into and for the state to assist local communities to be able to use. The LEAD model and Recovery Navigator program and Arrest and Jail Alternatives grant programs that are aligned with LEAD principles. One of the key features of this model is that it is focused exactly on that population that's highly likely to otherwise flow into the legal system. People who commit law violations and are known to commit law violations, so at a very high risk of enforcement. So as the graphic shows here, this is reducing the number of lawyers needed, also reduces the sort of court slots and flow of people through the court system, very helpful in managing cost and capacity in local legal systems. And it can prevent kind of a crisis of not being able to proceed with more serious cases because of the lack of a lawyer to assign. In Oregon, over the last 5 years, and there have been some recent stories out of Spokane that the Washington State Association of Counties has highlighted. It can really be sort of a fundamental legitimacy crisis if lawyers cannot be assigned to more serious cases. Making sure that individuals and situations aren't unnecessarily flowing through the court system is a good way of preventing those fundamental legitimacy crises with respect to public safety. Okay, next slide. Thank you. How this model works, again, there's a little tiny bit of LEAD 101. Because of the Recovery Navigator program, at least demonstration level version of this model is available in all 39 counties in Washington state since late 2021. Pre-booking diversion means there's warm handoff capacity to respond in the field when law enforcement encounters someone, has probable cause to believe they committed a crime where there's a public expectation of enforcement. The person otherwise would go to jail and be referred to a prosecutor. In lieu of that, there can be a warm handoff in the field. Person does not go to jail. They do not get referred to the prosecutor. Instead, they begin working with case managers, and that case manager coordinates what's happening with that person from that point on with law enforcement and prosecutors in a way that can often avoid additional charges or help to resolve pending charges or warrants. Okay, we can move on over to you, Brandy, this next piece.
All right, so not to put too fine a point on it, but I know Lisa spoke to it a bit early, right? There are different stages at which you can intercept someone for the purposes of diversion, right? There's pre-arrest, there's pre-booking, there's pre-filing, and there's pre-trial. And it might seem obvious, but breaking it down a little bit, I think will clarify where the value is in doing pre-booking and earlier. So pre-arrest, of course, is diverting before somebody begins the formal process of being, put into handcuffs and creating a formal record of an arrest. Now, LEAD offers that ability through what we call social contact referrals, but that is one form of arrest that gets intercepts somebody before they any record of police arrest or engagement in the criminal legal system begins. Next, you have pre-booking. So what that means is, right, somebody is arrested. There is the record of arrest that's created, but prior to taking them, to jail, to book them into jail, they are diverted at that point. That is what LEAD calls arrest diversions. So that's where somebody is arrested, but they are in fact diverted before they are booked into jail, and at that point they are connected with the case manager. Why the booking distinction matters, right, is, that at the point at which somebody is booked into jail, in many ways that kickstarts the criminal legal process in a significant way. So you are, housing that person if they are actually booked into jail, even if they, if they are held, then they might have a first appearance, at which point a public defender would have to stand beside them and work with them to argue about bail. So that is the point at which many of the costs associated with the criminal legal system get kickstarted. Pre-filing diversion, right? So that's after arrest, that's after booking. But at the point at which the prosecutor is deciding, do I file these charges or not, that is an opportunity for the prosecutor to say, actually, we're not going to divert this person, we're not going to go through with the regular criminal legal process, we're going to divert this person. However, at that point, you may have already, as I said before, had a first appearance where a public defender has had to do some work. You have had a prosecutor reviewing the case. You may have also had a judge deciding whether or not to, have hold that person or release them. So the criminal legal system, it's great to divert at any point in this stage, but really the criminal legal system has taken on a burden if it gets to the point of pre-filing, and then certainly pre-trial. At that stage, you definitely have, a public defense. The filing decision has been made. The person has been charged with an offense. And what that means is that a public defender has absolutely been assigned at that point. And so you have all of those things that Jason was talking about earlier, as far as, caseloads and all the implications. At the point at which you get to pretrial, you're definitely having to use some of that public defender caseload to work with an individual. So what are the benefits of pre-booking, right? Well, as I said earlier, I think you avoid jail, right? You avoid the court hearings, you avoid the assignment of counsel, but you also get a warm handoff, right? So I think what many folks in the criminal legal system would acknowledge is that the folks that R&P and LEAD are designed to work with, right? People who are engaged in the criminal legal system because of extreme poverty, unmet behavioral health needs, or substance use disorders, or use of substances. They are not likely, if I think we often see that population of folks, if you refer them to a service, especially if they're unhoused, it is going to be very difficult for them to go and make an appointment somewhere or go find the place that you have assigned them to go to, right? So you are really missing an opportunity if you get them through if you put them through the criminal legal system, because typically no one's going to meet them in the courthouse or walk them to that service. And so by doing it at pre-booking, you can have an officer call someone and have someone immediately respond and meet with them and do that connection that is really often the first tripping point of getting somebody connected with services, is having that first meeting take place. And so you get faster engagement in services. And as a result, you get quicker stabilization. So the net effect of all this, right, is that you have a lower court when you use pre-arrest or pre-booking diversion, you have a net effect of lower court volume, right, because you're not kickstarting that criminal legal system court engagement. You have fewer public defender assignments because if it's before booking, no public defender needs to be assigned, and so therefore it reduces the impact of lower. It reduces the impact of the lower caseload limits. And then finally, because you actually get, a connection to services quicker and more effectively, you ultimately get safer communities because the underlying reasons that that person is interacting with the criminal legal system start to get addressed versus, funneling them through this revolving door of a system that is not designed to address the reasons that that person is coming into contact with the criminal legal system. So with that, I'll hand it back to Lisa. Oh, Vanessa.
Yes. Vanessa's going to explain how the benefits of this framework also can play out in a pre-filing context, one sort of notch further along the process from pre-booking, but still without the filing of a criminal charge. Vanessa.
Thanks, Lisa. So in Whatcom County, we started developing our LEAD program back in 2019. And after operating for a bit, we noticed that, we identified some gaps in who was getting referred to the program. And through that, I would say about 95% of our referrals come from law enforcement, some from community, and then we have some that are self-referrals. And what we noticed through looking at some information in the prosecutor's office is that there were individuals that were not getting referred, that were still moving through traditional prosecution. And so what we ended up developing in collaboration with our prosecutors is what Brandy touched on, which is pre-filing. So we developed a policy and internal procedure with some criteria on what that would look like through the prosecutor's office. So if someone is arrested or booked, the PC, the probable cause, comes into the prosecutor's office and there's an initial review. And at that point, the prosecutor and the chief who reviewed the reports, if they identify that it's a low-level violation that stems from substance use disorder, behavioral health challenges, or extreme poverty, they will make that decision to not charge, not file, and refer to our LEAD program. And so what we're trying to do is, again, we identified the gap on where individuals were missing the opportunity to get into LEAD, but also we're saying we need to ensure that individuals who are appropriate for LEAD are getting connected to the appropriate resource at the right time. And what we're noticing is that it's working, but it's also getting individuals, like Brandy mentioned, stabilized faster, which is ultimately increasing public safety within the community. So we've been doing this for about 3 years. We're actually in the process of expanding what that looks like and seeing if we can get buy-in from at the city level, because we do have the Whatcom County Prosecutor's Office making these types of referrals. And I'll stop there, Lisa, unless you have any questions for me to touch on.
No, so great. Just to flag for anybody on the call that who is, LEAD RNP, we often talk about pre-booking and then free trial, which HCA has advised for RNP, in a scarce funding environment. Prioritizing pre-booking is really important for some of the reasons we've talked about. Pre-filing is a sort of middle road that might fit well in some communities where there's more prosecutor engagement in these programs than there is from law enforcement. However, next panel is going to illuminate how we can ensure, excuse me, that these approaches are useful to law enforcement. We're super grateful to have these three incredibly strong partners share their point of view on the LEAD Recovery Navigator program framework and how it can be helpful. Just flagging that it's completely, it's theoretically valuable to say that having alternatives to prosecution, detention, and conviction, is a good way to save resources, but it actually has to work, and it has to be seen to work on the ground to those who are charged with public safety and order responsibilities. So I'll turn to you, Under Sheriff Chapman, first to share your experience about how that can happen.
Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate that. Yeah, I am here to give you an example or two on how this has really worked. Let me break this down. We're a small county. We only have 18. We're a big county, but we only have 18 officers. So myself and the sheriff are responding to calls regularly. About 2 years ago or so, the RNP program came to us and said, hey, this is what we can do. We said, this would be great. I'd love to do it. And there wasn't a lot of follow through. Partly my fault, maybe partly the fault of the manager at the time. And maybe some cynicism from me. And so nothing happened. This last summer, I got recontacted by the manager, a new manager, Lisa Kennard, and she tells me, about the program, and I'm all in, but I'm thinking, what's the follow through going to be? Well, Lisa, or not Lisa, but Lindsay, you could maybe say borderline harassment. She really kept on me to make sure that not only, that she was going to get each one of her workers out with our deputies to show the value of this system, and she did it. And I immediately told my deputies, I said, hey, take them right now to whatever person fits this program and see what they can do. And the very first one, it was actually one I suggested to my deputy. I had responded with this deputy a few days before about a lady who was in crisis and had mental health issues and substance abuse issues, and she was a mess. And there was no crime or anything, but I left there and I told him specifically, I said, we're going to be out here a lot and it's going to end up with just, some type of arrest and get her in the system, which is not where she needed to be. So then, the RMP program shows up and I told him to take, this worker out there, and they did, and immediately got results. We have not dealt with this gal since, and which only this leads me to believe that it worked. She needed somebody to hold her hand through the process, and because she couldn't do it herself, and we don't have the time. We want to. We're a smaller county. We try, and our deputies every once in a while, will reach out and do a little extra, but we just can't do it. Since that time, we've had this is new for us, really, since summer. Every time a worker came in, I told the deputy, go take them to the known issue that you have and see what they can do. And they succeeded every single time. Lisa, Brandy, and Vanessa kind of all talked about this. This is where the rubber hits the road. It's working for us. And for me to say that, again, I'm a little cynical. There's a lot of unfunded mandates and stuff. I'm seeing it work on the road. It's saving us a ton of time. And I find a lot of value in this, and I hope we continue to do this. I could speak a long time about situations. I'm not going to do that. I'm just telling you, as a guy on the road who had some administrative duties, it's working. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Ooh, echo. Under Sheriff, that is such a good example of kind of your journey from cynicism to belief. It required seeing it work, and that no law enforcement partners are going to exercise their discretion to use these tools unless there is, that sort of tangible eyes-on experience of efficacy. And so that is the challenge for the project managers / harassers like Lindsay. Such a great story. Officer Moorbeck, can I turn to you?
Sure. Yes. I just wanted to start off with probably an attaboy for our navigator program. We just passed the 400 mark on people that we are dealing with and trying to get into assistance and helping with. So I think that's a huge shout out to Lindsay and our group down here, because they're doing a great job. Probably the biggest thing that I see with us is just like Brandy was talking about, all those pre-contacts before we put them in cuffs and before we take them away, is that ability to get them the help that they need and get them going in the right direction instead of the wrong direction that they're currently going. And I think we've been able to do that with our group and with our people that we've been doing down here. The other part of that too is that the part of it where she mentioned about getting people to court, probably our biggest turnaround is court cases and times and getting them out to court, because what happens if they don't go to court? What happens? They issue a warrant for their arrest. And we've seen that cycle so many times where they were, well, I didn't make it to court, I couldn't get a ride, I couldn't get out there, and they get issued a warrant, they go to jail, they reissue them another court date, kick them out, they don't make it, they get back, and it's just a never-ending cycle that I think the Navigator program has really had a huge impact on, is getting those people to court, getting them to their appointments on time. And it's not just court. I mean, like medical appointments that they normally would not go to because they can't or they don't have a way to get there. They're doing a lot of things to really help those people and get them going again in the right direction. Not so much that they're just, I mean, I guess sometimes for some, it's an easy excuse as, well, I just can't make it. Well, now they really don't have that excuse because they've got navigators out there that are more than willing to help them and get them to those appointments. So, I mean, our caseload, I mean, it helps with us. We show up to something, if they can come in and take care of it. We've got crashes, we've got accidents, we've got domestic, we've got all this other stuff going. They can step in and kind of start dealing with the people, and it frees our officers up to be able to go deal with even more stuff that's coming in maybe at the same time. So it's been a great program for us. I've been with it since they started with us here over 2 years ago. And it's just been a huge success, I think, because of all those things that they are able to do for us that a lot of times law enforcement is not able to do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Sergeant Navarro, I'm going to close this out.
Yes, good morning. I can't echo enough what Under Sheriff Chapman and Officer Morbeck have already said. The impacts that we've seen, at least within Thurston County as a whole, out on the field as a shift supervisor, I see this day in and day out. We spend a lot of time in that pre-arrest, that social referral. What we have seen the benefit of this program, or the LEAD program as a whole, is the engagement that now we have with the LEAD program in itself. It's just not a referral to where, okay, we referred them as an officer, where's the so what about it now, right? There's that communication that's happening back over to us, letting us know, hey, look, there's these appointments that are coming up. There's this impact that is happening with this individual that you referred. And often not, what that leads to is when we are contacting them once again out on the field, you're seeing thoughtful, meaningful engagements that's happening between the officers and that individual, because now we are all talking the same language. I'm going to use a very recent example where I've been personally involved. We have a gentleman that comes into our police department, hangs out in our lobby. He has a very lengthy 4-hour conversation with himself, not doing anything criminal. But now that we are engaging with the LEAD program, I could actually talk to him about, hey, what kind of resources are they providing you? And ever since we were able to do that referral, everything has been a positive engagement. He's been extremely thankful for the services that we've been able to at least link them with. From an officer standpoint, what I'm seeing a lot of my crew achieve is that they're just not handing out a pamphlet with a plethora of resources that could become overwhelming. We are now funneling a lot of those resources through these individuals, through the LEAD program, that is helping them at least navigate what is their best route to achieve the solution that they would like. I could only talk over the past couple of months where we've had, significant amount of referrals where we have seen that impact. It's communications that's happening amongst the officers. And it's just only getting better from here on our end, where we're actually having some community engagement with it. And some of our frequent contacts are even asking us about, hey, what do you guys know about the LEAD program? Can you get me communications with them? Because I don't know how. So that's obviously a good marker of what's happening within the community not just from a law enforcement perspective, but also from a end user perspective as well. So kudos to everybody that's out there doing the hard work. And again, I'm just looking forward to seeing what this is going to do in the near future, not only for our community, but for the state as a whole.
Thank you so much, Sergeant. I will just say, as a longtime public defender and probably at one point skeptic that this could be true, that change in the on-street dynamic, in-field dynamic between people who have been the focus of enforcement for a long time, often chronically throughout their life, and law enforcement, where everybody's kind of like working together on toward the same objectives, is remarkable. And when things are going well, you did a great job of explaining how it kind of transforms the whole energy of those contacts. For those on the call who, rightly will always have, the reminder in your head that it shouldn't be necessary to ask law enforcement how to get help. Like, that shouldn't be the only way that people can get help with severe behavioral health challenges. Of course, that's absolutely right. And that's why, like Brandy said, the LEAD RNP framework always maintains a community referral portal, a road-in that doesn't require contact with those systems. But those systems are going to encounter this population, and when they do, it can be very different. Thanks so much for illustrating that. We can just go on to the final subject matter content here. Next slide. I just wanted to mention one other way in which these long-term case management models, LEAD, RNP, AJA, which all sort of trace back to the same core elements, how they can be super helpful in our current Medicaid access landscape, both now and what we're facing in 2027 with the expected introduction of work requirements. Even now, in contrast to the pandemic, of course, individual Medicaid recipients have to recertify very frequently, every 6 months, and that certification process itself can result in churn and people who are otherwise eligible for benefits and the access that they bring to a wide array of health services being interrupted. So long-term case management is an incredibly protective resource to prevent that churn and prevent people from dropping off. Looking forward to 2027, when work requirements for Medicaid are expected to go into effect, these two are sort of, the projections of how many people you can see on the slide, how many people have been projected to likely lose benefits as a result of work requirements. For people who are still eligible because they are not able to work due to disabling conditions, not to say that everybody with disabling conditions is unable to work, but many people will be unable to meet the requirements of the Medicaid work requirement regime, federally mandated work requirements. Certifying that an individual is unable to meet those requirements is a way that many people could retain benefits, but having assistance essentially in that certification process is going to be absolutely critical to making the difference between whether somebody is churned off when they actually are technically eligible or is able to maintain access to care. So our state's existing long-term case management programs that reach an incredibly vulnerable population that tends to not have good luck navigating on their own bureaucratized requirements like this is of potentially incredible impact. So just flagging this as an asset that we have looking forward, or looking ahead, maybe not looking forward, looking ahead toward the impacts of those really ominous new barriers. These resources are potentially incredibly valuable. With that, we can close. What we need from partners. If any of what we've just covered resonates as important for your community or your kind of your sector, emphasizing what a big difference it makes to offer these resources pre-booking, at a very minimum pre-filing, so that a lawyer doesn't have to be assigned just to get a case dismissed with the attendant cost to local government. Recognizing these different referral pathways, they are not all the same. They have different advantages and disadvantages, making sure that no matter where someone, is sort of encountered in that continuum, there is a road back to the strongest care model that we know for many people with severe substance use disorder, that is long-term case management and navigation. But making sure that those are available at the earliest point possible in the field, pre-booking, pre-filing. And then, as you can see from this presentation, ensuring that these interventions actually are useful for law enforcement partners, and when they are, ensuring that those law enforcement partners' voices surface in local and state policy decision-making conversations. It's incredibly valuable. It was last year. We are super grateful to those law enforcement champions who have helped to bring to life what this can look like when these programs are implemented with fidelity to their corporate goals. Thank you. And I think the next slide is how to reach us. If any of the partners that you've heard today or the Lead Support Bureau can be of use and help in improving implementation around the state. Once again, thank you to HCA for allowing this time to think through the ways that these models are relevant in the current challenges that we face as a state. And back to you, HCA colleagues.
Thank you so much. What a great presentation, and thank you for bringing partners from across the state, Snohomish, Whatcom, Whitcomb, Clarkston, Tumwater. I mean, just such a great panel representing and being able to share their experiences with this model in different areas, different points along the sequential intercept. And so just thank you so much. I'll pass it over to Blake Ellison to facilitate some Q&A.
Yes, please. I know we had one question from Julian, a committee member, and Lisa, I saw you engaged. Thank you with that. I don't know if anybody else has any comments about, and the question was, what percentage of folks use public funded services compared to private? During a part of our presentation here, if anybody has information on that from this group, that would be great. And then Lisa, I think you had said, what do you mean percentage lead versus RNP participants? So
yeah, just wanted to confirm that Julian's question was about the population of participants in these programs, because if so, I think the overwhelming majority of services that are available for this population are publicly funded, but that doesn't mean that one of the roles of navigators, the navigator function of case management, is to be that broker of all available services. So matching people's circumstance as they progress on a recovery pathway to what's available in the community. And sometimes there are, especially, sort of private charitably funded options end up being really important in recovery housing, recovery shelter. That's certainly true in King County. So it's not a blanket answer, but I think the overwhelming array of services that lead RNP participants access tend to be publicly funded, which is why changing changing public funding landscape also has such reverberations for what people face.
right, thank you. Got a couple of thumbs up from Julian there. Thank you so much. Julian, go ahead. Follow-up question, please.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's any concern about the funding environment right now, because I know it seems like there's this thread of trust that's being built up, that people are relying upon, and they trust you guys to get to the to take care of the person needing the services. What impact would that have to start losing that, not having the resources to keep them?
huge concern for sure. Does anybody on the panel want to share what you think what impact it would have in sort of these developing channels and relationships to have capacity cut back?
When I talked about, being able to get to court and meet those documenting, be able to have those court dates, I think that would be a huge impact on that. Because if you don't have enough people to get them out there, we're going to go right back to the same boat we were in before, where you've got warrant after warrant after warrant being issued for these people not making it to court. And I think it would definitely have an impact on that.
Yeah, Lisa, if I could chime in too, just on that one. I mean, I can't say what the cost would be, but I can certainly talk about the cost differential. A lot of what LEAD offers on top of the like helping someone get to court and obviously the services, but is an alternate route to the legal system. And not only is it through a jail, so we're talking about costs for jails, but we're also talking about costs for public defenders and also public defense expert witnesses. If we're talking about somebody who's got a mental health diagnosis or substance use diagnosis, then obviously public defenders are trying to do what they can to help that person. And the person who's paying for that is the local tax base. It's coming out of the general fund oftentimes, not out of any other tax source or legislative fees, because public defense is all local funds. So when in the end, if there's not something like LEAD, or even prosecutorial diversion, or some sort of diversion like that, the cost not only ends up being an insurmountable cost in that you're paying for lawyers and public defenders, but where you're paying for them out of the public defense budget also only comes out of local general fund, which is another little problem I think that we're having. But anyway, I just thought I'd add that because it's a little wrinkle to this.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee members? Jason, I see. I'll get to you in a second here. Actually, go ahead, Jason. I don't see any other hands.
Oh, sure, Blake. Thanks all. Lisa, what a great presentation, team. Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm Jason McGill, help with the Medicaid program here with HCA, and thought I'd chime in for a few points. One, yes, couldn't agree more. Many people are served through the Medicaid population. In this population, we have a good benefit now available, and we'll be scaling up statewide to the extent that we can get participating jails to work with us, and Medicaid can now pay for services 90 days prior to release. That will include what's called a targeted case management benefit. That can include a recovery navigator component to that benefit. And so we're working on that. I think that's a great possibility. I think, Lisa, the other thing that comes to my mind on this, and of course, Medicaid is publicly funded. You do not have to rely as much on local services for those sort of reentry benefits that are fairly broad, including medication for opioid use disorder and alcohol use disorder, in addition to other behavioral health services, in addition to, as I mentioned, the targeted case management benefit. Lisa, you mentioned a major change coming to Medicaid with regard to work requirements, and I thought I'd just chime in on that too. The federal law does exempt the reentry population for those requirements. Easier said than done to operationalize that. So we need to do that as a state and figure out how to ensure that eligibility process is not overly burdensome in terms of the application. That is work we're underway with right now in advance of the January 2027 implementation for those work requirements. So that will be a major change. You also mentioned 600,000. That's the total population that will have to participate and validate work requirements. That's in essence the newly eligible population for Medicaid expansion 2014. They will have to validate their work requirements and community engagement requirements, such as volunteering and education. Could be other components. Again, reentry and other people with serious mental illness and SUD and other disabilities will be exempt from that requirement. We're operationalizing that. And we do have various estimates, very general estimates of about 100 to 200,000. There will be a number of people out of that 600,000 that will no longer be eligible for Medicaid. And it has a lot to do with how we implement these benefits and these exemptions. So we're working on all that now. Thanks all. What a wonderful presentation. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Jason. And thank you, presenters. Any more questions? Take any questions now that you have? Okay, I don't see any more. Thank you so much, folks, for your presentation. Appreciate it. Tony, any other comments?
No, just again, extending gratitude and also just kind of pointing to like the thread where the model is flexible so that like, I think like my takeaway from this is that based on the jurisdiction, based on the level of engagement from your prosecuting attorney's office or level of engagement from the law enforcement agency, the model helps to support where that engagement is. So that like, you know, if you have a law enforcement agency that's fully on board with diverting individuals into a program, you can prioritize that. And if you have a prosecuting attorney's office that's on board and engaged in those conversations, you know, that's another avenue. So it's great to see that sort of flexibility and how it's being operationalized across the state. And then also accounts of like with under Sheriff Chapman's experience, where at first, you know, it's kind of reluctant or, you know, there might have been some barriers or some hesitancy. But then after ongoing conversations and seeing how this can be a benefit to the community, these programs being implemented. And so just a great presentation, great summary, and really appreciate everyone's time today.
Thank you. I think next up, Michelle.
All right, thanks, Blake. Yeah, we want to take a bit of time just to review what we've covered during the meetings this year in 2025. Just give me a moment to share this. All right, so in December of 2024, perhaps many of you will recall we had a mural exercise where committee members could type in the things that they wanted to see continue from some of the committee structure and write in priority agenda items for the following year, which would be 2025. So here we're showing some of the top voted things in terms of the committee structure that we've carried forward into this year. RNP regional highlights, the 2 times the meeting public comment period, SURS plan updates, sending out the final agenda 1 week before the meeting. I know I can do better about that, and I will. And then SURSAC happening the first Monday of the month. And then here were some of the agenda items that committee members identified that they wanted to cover. So we had high votes for rural healthcare, finding ways to serve more rural areas, especially in Eastern Washington, doing a lead model series, a UW presentation on drug checking networks and the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab, 6109 implementation, working with the Joint Legislative and Executive Committee on Behavioral Health, a simple possession post 5536 update, quarterly updates on known opioid mortality statistics for Washington State, contingency management, and then learning what other states are doing that relates to SURSAC, including a note that you wanted to learn about states' models that are not necessarily aligned with the West Coast model. So in terms of the things that the committee must do, the mandatory items, as well as the identified priority items and plan implementation, we just wrapped up the lead education series. We had those in February, April, and December. We had a simple possession post 5536 presentation in March, and then a follow-up in May from the research and data analysis presentation on statewide arrest and charge data related to simple possession. We had SURS plan updates on the SUD intake screening and assessment work group and the safe supply work group in May, and then SURS plan highlights from the annual report in October. In terms of what other states are doing, we did focus mostly on Oregon State. We had a Measure 110 update in August, and then CJC Impacts Grant Program and Behavioral Health Deflection Grant Program overview in November. In terms of rural healthcare, we had a presentation on the rural access study findings. in July. We had 3 RNP quarterly reports presentations in March, June, and October, and received highlights, RNP highlights from Pierce County, King County, Greater Columbia, and Salish. So other additional agenda items included conversations around legislation for the 2025 legislative session, anticipated legislation in January, a check-in in March, and then an update in May. We had a presentation on programs, data acquisition, and management systems overview. That was the PDAMS overview in February. A research and data analysis presentation on the current state assessment in June. A report overview on the use of harm reduction and drug treatment among participants of syringe services programs in July. And an overview of the HCA SUD services client survey results also in July. And then in August, an HR1, that's the big beautiful bill, impacts of changes to Medicaid. And then we had a series of conversations about involuntary treatment. So an overview of the Involuntary Treatment Act and Secure Withdrawal Management Stabilization in September. Heard from Recovery Place Kent to get a provider perspective in October. And then heard about designated crisis responders and how they relate with ITA and SUD in November. So we do want to acknowledge that some of the requested items were not covered in 2025, such as the 6109 implementation, finding more ways to serve rural areas in Eastern Washington, learning what other states are doing that is different than the West Coast model, joint legislative and executive committee on behavioral health, and quarterly updates on opioid mortality statistics in Washington state and contingency management. So I just want to note that we're not forgetting about these things. We want to carry these over into this discussion in January when we're going to do some agenda planning. And we're really making an effort to make this more collaborative in 2026. So we'll have the priority setting meeting at a session at our next meeting in January, like I said. And then there's also a viewable and editable agenda planning document on the SURSAC SharePoint that's been made available to all committee members. So that is available for your ongoing feedback and so you can see the year at a glance. See all the items that are coming up that have been finalized for upcoming meetings throughout the entire year, as well as those items that have been that need a spot or have been identified and don't quite yet have a place. So we can all be on the same page about what is happening throughout the rest of 2026. If you have any questions about that, let me know. I'll put my email again in the chat, unless you have any right now. All right, thank you.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say huge appreciation to Michelle for organizing this and summarizing everything that we did in 2025. We felt like it was a good way to kind of close out our December meeting in terms of identifying like the breadth and extent of conversations that have occurred and the amount of information that we've been bringing to the committee for consideration as we move forward with conversations that relate to individuals who are using drugs, have a substance use disorder, and engaged in the community in various areas across Washington state. And so, we'll send this out, like we'll get this presentation kind of shared along with the notes and we'll get it sent out to the committee. But we wanted to kind of make sure that everyone had that kind of updated information going into the January meeting, because like Michelle indicated, the hope is in January, we can talk about how we're going to spend what will technically be like the final year of SURSAC's engagement as the RCW authorizing the committee does sunset December 31st of 2026. And so we have one more year together and just want to make sure that we're being really thoughtful and intentional about that time. And we're using it to the utmost of using that time in a way that kind of helps drive the conversations forward as they relate to the substance use recovery services plan, as well as the other work that's happening. And I see a note in the chat And yeah, hopefully the audio is coming through. I can try to restate everything I said. Hopefully everyone heard Michelle, but yeah, there might be some audio issues, so apologies for that.
I can hear everything.
All right, thank you. So yeah, just yeah, I think that's it. So if there aren't any questions from the committee, or comments, we do have about 5 minutes left. And so, Blake, maybe let's open it up for public comment just to make sure to see if there's anything in regards to the information that was just shared that somebody, non-committee members want to ask about or mention.
Yeah, exactly. So does any member of the public want to ask any questions or make any kind of statements? Please raise your hand virtually if you do. Again, calling for public comment. All right, Lindsay, please.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. So I was just curious, I can't remember his name, but he was with the Healthcare Authority and he spoke about funds that with Medicaid and whatnot and funding that might help support the jails.
Yes.
With case management and stuff. And I put a message in the chat about RMP not having an insurance requirement. So like currently we can go into the jails and do case management and outreach type work, depending on the jails, in different jurisdictions and whatnot. But we can do that currently because it doesn't matter if an individual has insurance or not. I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason picked that up.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lindsay. And yeah, that was Jason McGill, who is sharing those updates about the reentry waiver and the work that's happening around that. I think you bring up a good point, though, that we know across the state we have Recovery Navigator programs that are operating or supporting reentry to some extent or engaging with jail partners. And as we expand the reentry waiver to various jails across the state, I think we're gearing up for cohort 3, and we have a website. We'll get the link in the chat for anyone that wants information about that. And we can also invite our reentry team to come and provide a really in-depth update in early 2026, because this work's just been moving so fast and we're constantly adding new jails. But as we add those jails, it may make sense to kind of have that conversation about how the reentry benefit within a particular jail and staff that are supporting the reentry benefit work under Medicaid, how they're coordinating with Recovery Navigator program or other programs that might not necessarily have that kind of insurance requirement to engage, because we want to make sure we're kind of braiding those efforts to leverage and maximize the scope.
Yeah, absolutely. I like just because of how uncertain everything is in budget land. I like the word braided, and I like the option of how do we all work together to not duplicate a bunch of work and try to bring the service that is needed to everyone that needs it without duplicating stuff and not dumping more work on one program or another, and helping everybody that's doing the work to have a balanced workload and try to at least get the pay that they are deserving of and whatnot.
Thanks so much, Lindsay, and thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
We'll take that back. I think that's a good action item follow-up. I can take that back to our reentry team and just kind of flag that, and so appreciate that. It looks like we have about 1 minute left. I just noticed looking down at my printout agenda, I think I had an agenda item, But and I'm fine with just skipping that, which I think works out. And we can just kind of roll that into our like 2026 planning discussion that we're going to have in January. But as we close out today's meeting, I just wanted to thank everyone for their time, thank the committee members for their ongoing participation and dedication to this work. Thank you so much to everyone that is providing direct services in the community, providing outreach, our Recovery Navigator program providers, other programs across the state. Going into the holiday season, it's just so critical to have those services and resources available to people that are struggling during the holidays as the temperatures get colder and get into freezing temperatures. I just can't, thank you enough for all the work that you do. And so just wanted to kind of close with that. Wish everyone a happy holidays and happy new year. And we will see you again in January, early January of 2026. And thanks again.